Being a man means responsibility, accepting it, leaning into it.
I don't know, and I think I'm okay with that.
Love.
Tenacity.
Strong. For me, a man means gentleness and it means collaboration.
I'm a man. I told my son it's okay to cry. My dad never told me that.
Won't you let it all out?
Some men are chasing unrealistic ideals of what it means to be a man. And oftentimes it leads us to suffer in isolation and deal with depression and anxiety. Trust me, I've dealt with it and I continue to deal with it. But this is a conversation that most men aren't comfortable having for fear of appearing weak or soft. But today we are gonna have that conversation. Even my guest today, NBA champion and all-star Kevin Love, says that some of the most severe cases of depression and anxiety can occur at the peak of success. This is a particularly important conversation as we kick off Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm Jason Rosario, and this is Dear Men. Take me through what happened in 2017 during the game with the Hawks and when you had the panic attack.
I'd never experienced anything like that before. I thought I was having cardiac arrest or I was having a heart attack. I was gonna die. You know, some tough things were happening close to not only myself, but the people around me. I remember going into that game and not feeling quite right. It was just one of those things where I couldn't catch my breath. You know, my heart was pounding. I couldn't get it to stop.
Was there a trigger there? Was it something that someone said? Did you feel something in particular? What happened?
Everything that was going on away from basketball kind of manifested itself from there in the worst possible way. And I just thought to myself, oh, here we go again. They had sent me to the Cleveland Clinic and they said nothing was wrong. And that's when I really felt like, okay, there's obviously something wrong here. Not necessarily something that's going to show up on a test that they have, but I don't want to be here again. This was an experience where I was actually out there on the court, and it happened during a game, and I didn't have anywhere to go, so I just checked myself out and went straight to the locker room. It wasn't until the next week after that I thought to myself, looked in the mirror, I wasn't passing the mirror test, and I thought, wow, I really have to change something. So
have you gotten better at recognizing those markers?
For sure, and I've gone to therapy now for about since that time. I think it actually had started, within 10 days of that happening.
You know, what's interesting to me is that as an athlete, you get paid to be in tune with your body,
right?
Intimately.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's just so surprising that you just didn't have an awareness of what was happening in that regard.
I had always in my life had somewhere to go in situations like that. Like it would either manifest itself in rage because I didn't really know what was going on, especially when I was young. I would have rage fits because I didn't know what I was feeling. My room would maybe be smashed up. There'd be things broken. I'd be one of those kids like screaming into his pillow, or I would just sit there and not come out of my room. Basketball was always that safe place for me, the place where I would go and clear my head, and that was the last domino to drop. I was always taught to suppress it. I had my playbook when I was young where it's just, never show your emotion. And my dad was from the time, he was born in '49, his dad much before that, and they were taught to suppress it. I just kind of took from him what I learned and carried that over into my adulthood.
And your dad was an NBA player?
Yes.
Back in the 70s?
Yes.
Did he teach you anything about how to handle the pressures? Now, I know it was a different world, different time.
Right.
And especially after you kind of had the experience and started to be more vocal about it, were there any conversations?
Sure. Well, I know that my dad's side of the family has dealt with this kind of stuff before, especially from a depression standpoint. I think my dad, he did a great job with us kids in order to, set us up for success. I think coming from his background and coming from an age where you just didn't talk about it, he didn't necessarily have the tools in order to teach me what I was going through or be able to express myself, because he taught me to, never show them your weakness. Never, just keep it inside. Don't tell anybody what you're feeling. Get over it. There's just different triggers that I remember. I think it's very important to get it off your chest, and it's very liberating when you do that. I truly feel like nothing haunts us like the things we don't say. A lot of things haunt us that we keep inside.
I think a large part of the reason why we don't seek help especially around mental health issues, is because we feel like we have to uphold these standards of masculinity and manhood, right? I wonder how that is more or less prevalent in the culture that you're in, right? In the league, you're in locker rooms. Are you having these conversations with guys at all?
I definitely am, especially since my article came out on the Players Tribune. I've had a number of guys that actually haven't expressed themselves, at all publicly, and have come up to me and asked how I can get help. Being vulnerable is very important. I think that's another word that has a negative connotation to it, especially when it comes to masculinity and manlyhood. You feel like you can't be vulnerable, especially in a number of situations, including playing professional sports or playing sports in general. So I think it's important that we have these conversations and to further these conversations. And in some ways, just changing the language.
One more time, sir.
A lot of people think that the more successful you are, the less prone you are to suffering from anxiety and depression. It's actually the opposite, as you can attest to. So tell me how you deal with that as a successful athlete, and then how that's playing out in your life on a day-to-day basis.
Well, what I've learned is no one's immune to depression. Nobody's immune to anxiety. One of my favorite people in the world, Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
So when he passed, Kate Spade passed in the same week. I watched Robin Williams' documentary as well, where he suffered from a lot of demons, and that really hit home for me. And a lot of people have come up to me and either told me their stories, and they're not willing to share it with anybody yet, whether it be a therapist or a friend or a family member. But knowing that it transcends any race, sexual preference, socioeconomic status, whatever it is, it really transcends really anyone, and anybody can be dealing with it. And I would bet you more often than not that, whether it's yourself or somebody within arm's reach is dealing with it close to you. And it's a big part of the reason I'm sitting here today, because I wanted to share my story.
Kevin, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
I think I rely on those old traditional male stereotypes to just, put my head down and just try to grind through it, or drink a lot.
I'm not a very emotional person. I just sort of, internalize it and then let it out until I'm exhausted, and then you attempt to move on as best as you can.
I've struggled with depression, with anxiety, with ADHD. I've struggled with all of those over the course of the years, and especially as a black man, it's something that we don't talk about. It's certainly stigmatized in our community.
Manhood, assumes that you repress your emotions, and then there's the double cake layer of being a Korean American man, which is a solitary being in an island of loneliness.
I was going to a therapist for a while, and she helped me tremendously. But I don't really have somebody close enough for me to tell my dark secrets and what's on my mind.
When you're trying to express that, it's better not. So you put that there, unless you wanted to face some sort of, depression of some sorts of, you don't open that box. That stays.
You can find more mental health resources on my Instagram and Twitter at Jason Rosario. And make sure you use the hashtag Dear Men and tell me about your journey. Thanks again for watching. I'm Jason Rosario, and this is Dear Men.